Ever had that moment where you pause, just slightly unsure, like when you're telling someone where you left your wallet, is it in your bag or on your bag?
Oh, definitely.
Those tiny prepositions of place, the ins and ons and ats, they can feel like little hurdles in everyday English.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while they might seem small, these prepositions are, well, fundamental for painting a clear picture of location.
Mm.
It's really worth taking a closer look at how they work.
And that's precisely what we're doing today. We're diving deep into the sometimes subtle, sometimes, surprisingly systematic world of English prepositions of place.
Okay.
Think of this as your shortcut to feeling really confident about using these essential words, making your English not just understood, but like truly precise.
Right.
We're aiming to unlock those nuances that can really elevate your communication.
And we're not just going through basic definitions here. We'll be exploring those finer points of meaning and tackling the common stumbling blocks that often confuse learners.
Exactly. And our guide for this exploration is a really helpful lesson that lays out a wide range of prepositions, from the ones we use constantly to those that pop up maybe less often.
Mm-hmm.
It even includes a way to test your understanding, although our focus here is on grasping the concepts, not, giving you a quiz.
Right. No test today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with these little location indicators?
So I think a logical starting point is to understand their primary role. Prepositions of place essentially tell us about the location or the position of something in relation to something else.
Okay.
It's kind of right there in the word itself. The position and preposition sort of hints at its function.
Ah, that's a clever way to remember it. Position in preposition equals location.
Okay. Give us some of the real workhorses, the prepositions that we encounter all the time.
Right. Let's start with on. Pretty common. Imagine a book on the table.
Okay.
It indicates that the book is resting on a surface.
Okay.
Then we have in, like water in a glass, showing containment within something. Those feel pretty straightforward. Yeah. What about when things are close to each other? I always find myself wondering, which word fits best there?
Good question. We often use next to or beside for that. Your phone might be next to your notebook.
Right.
Beside is quite similar,
Yeah.
implying touching or very close proximity, but it often carries a slightly more maybe formal tone. You could say, the pen is beside the pad. Do you find you use one more than the other?
That's interesting. I think next to is probably my go-to. Yeah.
That's common.
So next to feels more everyday for close proximity, and beside is its slightly more formal cousin, maybe?
Kind of, yeah.
What about when things are a little further away but still nearby?
Then we have near or near to.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the cafe is near the library.
Okay.
You can also say near to, but honestly, near is far more common in everyday speech.
Ah, okay.
Now, consider a shop by the corner. You could also say it's next to the corner or near the corner. What guides which one feels right in that moment?
I suppose it depends on how close you want to emphasize it is. Like right on the corner versus just in the general vicinity.
Exactly. Precisely. And by fits into this group too. There's a bench by the entrance.
Yeah.
By can mean next to or near, often suggesting a convenience or a short distance. Think of leave the keys by the door. You want them easily accessible.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or ask for help at the information desk by the elevators. Close and convenient.
So by often implies a short, convenient distance. That's a helpful distinction. Now, you mentioned a crucial grammar point earlier. What should we keep in mind?
Oh, yeah, this is fundamental. A preposition is always followed by an object. Always.
An object.
This object will be a noun, like door in by the door, or it could be a pronoun. So we always have that structure.
Yeah.
Preposition plus object.
That makes sense. The preposition sets the stage for where the object is located. Okay, let's build on our location vocabulary beyond these basics. What comes next?
Okay, let's look at between. This is used when something is situated in the middle of two distinct items. Only two.
Two things. Got it.
For instance, my apartment is between the bakery and the bookstore. Or there's a path between the two houses.
Two defined points with something in the middle. Clear enough. What if there are more than two items then?
That's where among or amongst come into play.
Yeah.
These indicate being surrounded by or part of a larger group.
Okay.
Picture a bright flower among green leaves. The flower is surrounded, or maybe their old cottage was nestled among the hills.
Surrounded by many, got it. And the other meaning you mentioned, in a group.
Right, like he was the loudest among the crowd. I mean, within that group, his voice was the most prominent.
I see.
Or honesty is a value trait among our team. You might even know it from like games or books where a hidden person is operating among others.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Among is for being part of a larger, less defined set than between. Okay. You also mentioned amongst. Is there a difference there?
Amongst carries the exact same meaning as among. It's simply less commonly used in contemporary English today.
True.
You'll still encounter it, particularly maybe in older texts or certain dialects, but among is generally the preferred form now.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay. What other ways can we describe location?
Well, we have behind, which naturally means at the back of something.
Simple enough.
There's a small garden behind the house, or I think someone is standing behind us.
Yep.
And then the opposite, in front of, indicating a position directly before something else like the podium is in front of the audience.
Right.
Or that polite reminder, please don't park in front of the gate.
Pretty self-explanatory, those two. Now, what about when things face each other? That's another area where I sometimes hesitate on the power word.
Right, that's where opposite comes in handy. The two buildings are opposite each other.
Yeah.
Opposite clearly signifies a facing relationship. Think of the coffee shop is opposite the bank. Or the person sitting opposite me on the train was reading a fascinating book.
So a direct facing relationship. Okay. You also mentioned across from. How does that differ? Is it the same?
It's often interchangeable with opposites, yeah, but it can sometimes suggest a separation or a space in between.
Ah, a space.
For example, the library is across from the park, implying maybe a street or open area separates them.
Okay, I see.
Or the interviewer sat across the desk from me, highlighting the desk as the dividing space.
So across from often has that sense of something being in between, even if it's just implied. You even gave us that little formula. Something pluses, plus across, plus thing, plus from, plus other thing.
Yeah, that structure can help visualize it.
Let's remember it. Yeah.
Exactly. Now let's shift our perspective a bit to vertical relationships.
Up and down.
Up and down. We have over and above, both indicating a position higher than something else. You might say there's a painting over the fireplace or there's a shelf above the desk. And in many cases, they convey basically the same idea of being at a higher level.
Higher up, got it. But I suspect there's a subtle distinction. There usually is.
There can be, yes. Over sometimes carries a sense of covering or extending across.
Covering.
Think about putting a blanket over the sleeping child. The blanket is touching and covering.
Right.
Or the clouds drifted over the mountains. In these cases, above might sound a little less natural. It's subtle, but over can imply that extension or coverage.
Ah, so over has that potential for contact or extending across a surface. What about above then? How's that different?
Above generally indicates a higher position with a clear separation. The birds flew above the trees.
Yeah.
Or the temperature is above freezing.
Okay.
There's a sense of being at a higher level without necessarily touching or covering.
Nah.
You wouldn't typically say the clouds drifted above the mountains if they were right on the peaks, would you?
No, over definitely feels more right there. Yeah. That distinction makes sense. Okay, what about going the other way, lower than something?
Right, we have under and below, similar to over and above. They often overlap in meaning. You could say the cat is under the table or the temperature is below zero. Pretty interchangeable there sometimes.
Any similar nuances like with over above?
Yes, actually. Under can also imply being covered or concealed. The lost keys were under the sofa cushions, covered by the cushions.
Oh, okay. Covered.
Or the treasure was buried under the sand. Below, on the other hand, often refers to a lower level without that implication of being directly covered. Like our apartment is below theirs, or the sunken ship is far below the surface of the ocean.
So under can suggest being covered or concealed, while below is more about just a lower position in a sequence or level. You had an interesting example with a plane over the ocean.
Right, yeah. If you're on a plane high over the ocean, you'd probably say there's nothing below us but water.
Sure.
It emphasizes the lower level without any sense of covering.
Okay, vertical relationships clarified. Let's move on to enclosed spaces. This is another area where I sometimes second-guess myself. In or inside?
Yeah, good one. For enclosed spaces, we often use inside and in, and they frequently mean the same thing. You can say, look in your bag, or look inside your bag, with very little difference in meaning.
So a container or some kind of defined area.
Yes, but inside often emphasizes the enclosed nature of the space and sometimes the fact that it can be opened.
Oh, interesting.
Like, the surprise is inside the box.
Right.
You can open the box to reveal it.
Right.
The kernel is inside the nut. You need to crack it open. Even abstractly, inside a complex system, there are many interacting parts.
The key seems to be that sense of being contained within something that has some kind of boundary, even if it's not always physically openable in the usual sense.
Exactly.
How does in differ then, more specifically?
Well, in is used more broadly for being within limits or boundaries, not necessarily something you can physically open, like there's a scratch in the paint.
Ah, yeah, you can't open the paint.
Right. So while they often overlap, inside can carry that extra implication of being within a contained space that has some form of access.
That's a helpful shade of meaning. Okay, now let's tackle a real sticking point for many English learners. At versus in for location.
Absolutely. This one comes up a lot. You can say in the restaurant or at the restaurant and in the park or at the park and often be understood perfectly fine.
Right.
So both can indicate being present at a location.
So it's not always a hard and fast rule. It depends.
Not always, no. But at becomes more specifically necessary for locations where you are generally not inside a building or a clearly defined enclosed space.
Okay.
Like, I'll meet you at the bus stop. You'll be at a specific point. Similarly, at the beach, at the stadium, at the corner of Elm Street. These are points or open areas.
That makes sense. At seems to pinpoint a specific location, whether enclosed or open. But you also mentioned a subtle difference in emphasis, even when you could use either at or in.
Yes, this is where the nuance comes in. It's subtle. In can sometimes emphasize being physically within the space itself.
Inside it.
Yeah. For example, where's the manager? Oh, she's in her office. The focus is on her physical presence inside that room.
Okay.
At, on the other hand, can also suggest an activity or a purpose related to that location.
Ah, okay.
Where's the manager? She's at a conference. Here, the location implies an activity she's doing there.
Ah. So, at can hint at a reason for being there, even if it's not explicitly stated. You had another example with the post office, right?
Exactly. I was waiting in the post office emphasizes my physical presence inside the building. Just waiting.
Right.
But I was at the post office to mail a package. Highlights the specific purpose, the activity of my being there. It's a subtle layer of meaning, like you said, but it's often there.
Those subtle layers really enrich understanding. Okay. Now, are there any absolute exceptions to these general tendencies that we just have to memorize? The hard rules.
There are a few key exceptions, yes. Yeah. Definitely worth knowing. Firstly, it's always at home.
Always at home.
Are you at home? He's at home right now. We don't say in home, even though in the house is perfectly correct.
Yeah, that's true.
Any thoughts on why that might be?
That's a good question. Maybe home functions more as a concept or a specific point of reference rather than just a physical enclosed building, like an idea.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah. What's another common one?
In school and at school always felt a bit different to me.
They are. They are different. In school refers to the process of education or being enrolled in the school system.
It's a system. Okay.
All children must remain in school until a certain age. At school refers to physically being present at the school building.
Ah.
The teachers are at school preparing for the new term. Physically there.
So in school is about the educational status. At school is about the physical location. That's a really helpful distinction.
Yeah. And similarly, in the hospital often implies being a patient receiving medical care.
Right, being treated.
She's in the hospital recovering from surgery. But at the hospital indicates being there for any reason, visiting someone, working there, whatever.
Okay.
We're at the hospital to see our friend. Again, you see that at plus purpose idea subtly at play there too.
Okay, in the hospital for patients, at the hospital for everyone else. Got it. One more key exception you mentioned.
Yes, the difference between in bed and on the bed.
Ah, yes.
In bed usually means you are sleeping or resting under the covers.
Under the covers.
The kids are in bed. On the bed simply means you are physically on top of the mattress, not necessarily under the covers. The cat likes to sleep on the bed during the day.
In bed for sleeping, resting. On the bed for being on the surface. Okay. These exceptions are definitely good to keep in mind. Now, you mentioned something you called the prepositions pyramid. What's that about?
This is just a useful mental model, really, for thinking about prepositions when referring to increasingly specific geographical locations.
Okay, like levels.
Exactly. At the broadest level, the bottom of the pyramid, we use in for large areas like a country, city, town, village, or neighborhood. She was born in France. He lives in London. They have a shop in the downtown area. Big places.
Big containers get in. Got it. What's the next level up the pyramid?
On is typically used for streets, roads, and highways, things you travel on.
Right.
Their house is on Main Street. The accident happened on Highway 101.
So linear routes get on. Makes sense. And the most specific level, the top.
At is used for a specific address, the exact point. Their house is on Main Street at number 42 Main Street.
Ah, okay.
So you move from the general area in to the specific route on to the precise point at. Try applying that to where you live. It usually works.
That pyramid structure is a really clear way to organize those prepositions for different scales of location.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, the last major category we wanted to touch on, transportation. This is another area where people often get tripped up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It trips up a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The general guideline for transportation is this. We use on for forms of transport where you can generally stand up, move around.
Move around. Okay.
Think about a bus, a train, a plane. You can walk on board and move within them. So you are on a bus, on a train, on a plane, and also for things you literally ride on top of, like a bicycle or a horse. You're on a bike.
Freedom to move equals on. What about when you're more confined then?
Then we use in. We use in for vehicles where you are typically seated and cannot move around freely. Like in a car, you're generally strapped in, right?
Yeah.
Or in a taxi, in a van. So basically on if there's room to move, in if you're more enclosed and seated.
That seems like a pretty consistent rule, actually. But you mentioned a slight twist with boats.
Yes, boats are a little bit of an exception, but it's based on size, which kind of fits the rule anyway.
How so?
We tend to say on a ship or on a ferry, larger vessels where you can walk around on the deck.
Right, you can move around.
But we use in a small boat, in a canoe, in a kayak, smaller vessels where your movement is quite restricted. You're sitting in it.
Okay.
So it still comes back to that idea of mobility, really.
Ah, so even with boats, it relates to whether you can move around. That makes the overall principle more consistent.
Well, we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We have indeed, yeah. Prepositions of place, while seemingly simple, have, well, a lot of interesting nuances.
So to bring it all together, these little words in, on, at, and, the many others, they provide essential context about location.
Crucial context.
And while some rules are quite direct, as we've explored, many rely on understanding subtle differences in meaning and, remembering a few key exceptions.
And mastering these isn't just about getting the grammar right, is it? It significantly enhances your ability to communicate precisely and confidently in English.
Definitely.
The careful choice of a preposition can really refine the image you're painting with your words.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond just being understood to truly conveying the specific sense of place you intend. So, here's something for you listening. In the coming days, really pay attention to the prepositions of place you encounter.
Good idea.
In spoken and written English. Notice how native speakers use them in different contexts. Do you start to hear those subtle differences between at and in, or maybe over and above?
Yeah, observe those patterns.
Observing those patterns in real-world language use is a fantastic way to solidify your understanding and, just keep learning.